road to Reignited has been a wild one. Aside from the usual bad stuff like the countless spoilers pushed as trailers, including showing off the final cutscene of Spyro 3, for fuck's sake, what are you doing, guys? And of course, the countless channels that spawn purely to cash in on the topical subject and push those spoilers in worthless, nothing content nobody will give two shits about in the long run. Like, remember Falcon McBob and that whole ordeal? Activision's marketing machine failed the insane trilogy in my opinion, but they've clearly learned their lesson. It's kind of strange to see just how much effort was put into this. But how did we go from a harmless egg to tease the reveal trailer to a fucking Spyro drone flying around blazing with Snoop Dogg?
Spit that fire one time!
Like, what in the actual fuck were they smoking when they come up with this stuff? I was actually fortunate enough to get some time with the game at PAX Australia just 2 weeks before launch, along with actually meeting Spyro in barbecue form, you know, before he was transformed into a fucking drone. It's definitely been an interesting ride to say the least. No sheep were harmed in the making of this video. Yeah, maybe not physically, but emotionally, the poor things are probably so traumatized after that, the only thing you can squeeze out of them now is sour milk. They're ruined! But enough banging on about the past. It's been almost 3 years since I reviewed the original Spyro Trilogy, so I think we're in need of a quick refresher. Also, big shout out to all the people who made their own Spyro Revisit episodes in September before the game got delayed, trying to cash in on the topical subject, but only looking like big cash-in dummies in the end. Ya big dummies. The original Spyro the Dragon is a good, solid experience, albeit an incredibly simplistic one that lacked much difficulty or flair. The sequel, the only one I actually grew up with, improved the formula on all fronts with a lot more personality, story material and world building, as well as cementing the incredible gameplay. The third game, Year of the Dragon, I cannot fucking stand. At the time I made my original episode, I was so conflicted with my breakdown of the game, as while I personally find the game to be rather tiresome and sometimes painful to get through, that it's not necessarily a bad game for that. So in true classic Square Eye Jack fashion, I gave it a 7 out of 10 as a middle ground between the quality of its predecessors. Now, I hate to have to go back and change any score, but this has been on my mind for a while now. I feel that on a technical level, while this game is good, that it just goes backwards with a lot of the good work Spyro 2 did, and made the entire formula a convoluted formulaic mess, which, combined with the messy execution of a lot of aspects, Spyro Year of the Dragon is officially being downgraded to a 6 out of 10. I can only compare it to the original Crash Bandicoot and Medieval, games that are definitely still worth a go and are good, but do have their fair share of issues and feel a bit outdated, even for the time. Sorry to start this whole thing off with a whole lot of backtracking, but I've had 3 years to sit on that old score and it needed to be addressed. But now that we've got that out of the way, we can finally dive headfirst into the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. Surprisingly, we don't get any pizzazz or really anything to excite us before playing. Probably for the best, it took these companies a year to develop a skip option last time, but the nostalgia bug is kicking me pretty hard right now, not getting anything at all. To be perfectly honest, even with their issues, I never felt like there was enough material here that a remake could potentially fix without drastically changing how these games are structured. So today, much like the Insane Trilogy, I'll be taking a look at each of the 3 games individually and comparing them to the originals. In my opinion, if a remake can't surpass, or at the very least, live up to the quality of the originals, then it shouldn't exist. In the end, the average score overall will be my final score for Reignited. Alright, holy shit, let's get stuck in. The introduction with Gnasty Gnorc sets the story in place much better than the original, actually seeing the dragons on TV talking their childish shit. And then the Artisan's homeworld loads up and you're just like, god damn, it's beautiful! The visuals in this game are absolutely breathtaking, let me just say that. Colours are so vibrant, animation is bouncy and free-flowing, each area is overflowing with mood, and the lighting is just immaculate. We've spent 20 years gushing over the graphics of the original, but the lack of any limitations just brings these environments to life. Even down to the details, such as Spyro's flame burning the grass around him. That's so cool! Spyro looks awesome in his own right, along with all of the other dragons we rescue along the way. They're much more individual and unique, fitting into each of their worlds a lot better. Playing as Spyro just feels so good though. Toys for Bob have just nailed the control in this game. It feels amazing to play. Jumping and gliding does take some adjustment, it seems to have a little more weight to it, but it doesn't take longer than the first handful of levels to replace your muscle memory. I've seen some people complain that Spyro feels a lot stiffer to control in this, but I don't know where that comes from. Yes, there are times when the expected learning curve kicks in and feels different, but that doesn't automatically make it bad. Remember, we're dealing with modern analog controls here, so there is a much wider range between 0 and 100. We're not stuck with just 2 extremely contrasted speeds anymore. We've got all the movement in between. That's why when you first start charging around, it might feel like it takes longer for Spyro to turn left or right. And look, once you adjust, this game is just so much fun. Seeing all of these worlds so highly detailed, one of my biggest concerns for the game was that the full draw distance would actually be more distracting than we're used to. Normally the area that looks out of bounds isn't fully loaded in, so you can focus on what is directly ahead of you. But seeing these areas in full is actually next level. It's not a distraction by any means and gives everything a lot more life. One of the other arguments I've heard on this is that it's unfaithful to Spyro's unique style, as these levels were not designed with it in mind. But no, if anything, it just makes these already amazing environments that much more rich to explore. And then they go and top that all off by remastering Copeland's original soundtracks? The end result is just superb. Now there is also the option to play the original soundtrack instead, but I don't know what kind of monster would prefer that over the remastered dynamic soundtrack of Reignited. Seriously, depending on what's happening on screen, how intense or calm the adventure gets, the soundtrack adjusts accordingly to immerse you into the world even further. It's expert, that's all I can say. Running through these levels has never felt better. Especially for me, my copy of Spyro the Dragon is in such poor condition that I've never actually played this game with the amazing soundtrack, so I'm even more stoked! And while I am kind of peeved that we don't get gems flying across the screen in all their satisfaction during loading time, details like this have zero impact on the overall game. Besides, I almost didn't even notice it at first because I was so distracted with just how quickly the levels load. It is longer than the originals, definitely, but given how full each area is, it's far superior to how Insane was handled its first year. But while we're comparing with Insane, quickly, I'd like to point out the first thing I'm truly disappointed with in this game. Remember how mediocre the boss fights in the original Crash Bandicoot were, until Vicarious Visions came along and gave them some added flair. They didn't change anything with the actual battles, but the added details before and after really gave them so much more energy. If there is one thing that needed improvement in the first Spyro game, it was the bosses. Now of course, we can't expect any drastic structural changes to these types of games, that'd be too much. But for these boss levels, why couldn't we have had a simple 15-second cutscene before the fight, just to give them a little more personality and reason to fight them, instead of just having us murder these guys and move on? I think that's a seriously missed opportunity here, and it's that kind of stuff I expect to see with such large-scale remakes like this one. Again, it is one of those details that doesn't really affect the main game, but it would have been nice to see them get some extra attention. All in all, for part 1 of this trilogy, it's been knocked out of the park on all accounts. The updated visuals vastly improve how levels feel to play, especially for some areas that may have been a bit lackluster in the original, and thankfully, that's a common trend across all 3 games. Same goes for the music. While changes are subtle, they're not a departure by any means, and combined with a vast library of familiar sound effects making a return, presentation is A+. I think most importantly though, Spyro controls beautifully through each area, and he's just adorable. He's an annoying, unlikable brat in the original, just from the delivery of his lines, but dropping that for the much more reluctant but determined hero we got in the sequels, this first game is easily starting us off strong. Spyro the Dragon gets 7 out of 10. And let me say, that's a strong 7 as well. With scores this high, it does come down to the gritty details. And had the bosses been given any extra flair, I'd have easily put down an 8 for this. Wow, this is my childhood right here. Seeing some of these levels, hearing the soundtracks, exploring summer forests took me back to the magical wonder of my younger self, experiencing this for the first time, and, in particular, the music in Zephyr. Yes, I've learned how to say the fucking name, shut up. Zephyr. Hearing the music in Zephyr brought a tear to my eye. While I noticed it before, having complete control over the camera really does make these games a lot easier to deal with. While the strange back of Spyro's head view is still an option, and the extra flexibility can actually ruin otherwise challenging side games, the ability to position the camera wherever you please is such a godsend. I did see some complaints about the camera though, particularly for the underwater. I can see where these are coming from, it can be a little awkward, but it was always like that, so I don't think it's that big of an issue. My worst camera experience while underwater was also a vehicle segment with Hunter's Stingray. Just look at how far down the screen Spyro is, resulting in a heap of dead space. It's kind of annoying, but it doesn't really affect it too much. This is where the series started to incorporate more of these vehicle levels and different playstyles for some much needed variety. And honestly, I think they did a really good job at rebuilding them to the finest details. Nothing feels off about any of them. They'd all still offer some challenge if I didn't know this game like the back of my hand, but you know, something does actually feel slightly off. Everything feels just a bit slower. You may not even notice it, but comparing various events across the games that run at consistent speeds, you can start to see that over time, Reignited drags its feet a little. I'm not entirely sure what leads to this, other than everything just running slightly slower by design as a way to make things easier. Look at the trolley, for example. While I'm sure you could measure the speeds of both and find that the forward momentum is identical, switching lanes kind of juts you over and slows the game down ever so briefly. Even if it is just an extra fraction of a second, getting that extra reaction time is important and quickly builds up over a lengthy run. I'd honestly say it's no bad thing, especially for modern audiences, and it's also not enough to affect a long-time player's reaction memory, in my opinion at least. I didn't feel thrown off by the change, but I did still notice it. People might argue, and I've seen them do it, that the originals weren't that impossible to begin with. A point of view I totally understand, but come on. Trouble with the trolley is such a long-running joke at this point. At least certain aspects have been dumbed down where it might be necessary. By no means, though, do I think that's a negative. The one thing that knocked me about in this game was fighting Gulp. I can't put my finger on why, but this took me ages to do. His laser blasts are deadly accurate, he's fast when he charges, and I feel like a lot of times for me, the free camera was actually a hindrance. Like, the camera didn't do a good enough job of staying focused on Gulp, and as a result, it was affecting the direction of my charge, resulting in me getting hit. I could be wrong, and this could be down to a number of other factors, my shit ability being one I'm not going to rule out, but I have been playing this game my entire life, and Gulp is never an issue for me. From what I've seen, people seem split on this. Talking to my friends, they didn't seem to have any issues, but online, I'm seeing a lot of people claiming the same as me, so I'm not real sure. I don't want to strike the game too bad for it because, like I said, it could just be me, but I can't deny he is a lot more accurate than I remember. Aside from that though, a lot of my other gripes with Spyro 2 are simply gripes, just little things that bug me. Some of the character redesigns are a little odd in my opinion. I never looked at these dragons in Skelos Badlands as flying cat demons, but whatever. Though, something about the human characters is just really off-putting to me. They're all a lot more generic. These two look ripped straight from one of those pre-made asset storefronts. One of the other characters in Scorch, of course, is Bombo the Flag Keeper. Oh, sorry. He's been renamed to Bob the Flag Keeper. Now, your memory is probably fooling you, as did mine, but this character never actually ran around throwing exploding bombs at you in his bombing game. He always threw little energy balls. Other characters in this level normally had shotguns as well, but those have been replaced with slingshots. Back in Spyro 1, Twilight Harbor had its automatic weapons dumbed down to paintball guns, which really kills the entire theme of this level, but oh well, I suppose. I do think it needed to be done, because you can't have kids running through a kids game getting shot at and blown up with actual hand grenades, so I do understand. But comical explosive barrels and cannonballs, that's still fine apparently. Particularly with Spyro 2. There are a lot of explosives in this game and people being shot all over the place. Again though, does any of this affect the overall game? Of course not. So why even mention it? Because I'm struggling to find any complaints with this remake. It is incredibly solid. I love seeing all the remade cutscenes before and after each level. The one with the Yeti is kind of broken though. He screams and the block falls down and crushes him, but in the original, he actually stomped the ground first. I don't know how they fucked that up. The levels themselves, though, are as good as I remember, if not better thanks again to that extended draw distance, giving everything a lot more life. The details even extend beyond the game. On PS4, the controller is another indicator of Sparks' health, changing colour as he does within the game. I love it! And majority of the characters were really awesome to see in HD, particularly Ripto, and his final boss fight was just awesome. Even with my issues, they are all so minor and unimportant that I really don't think it matters all that much. Taking my experience in the Gulp battle with a grain of salt, this is exactly how I remember Gateway to Glimmer. Hell, I don't even mind the lack of PAL region changes being cut because that name is horrible. Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage gets 8 out of 10. This is a hard game to fault, and for my countless playthroughs of it, Reignited is easily one of my favourites to date. Alright, this is going to be interesting. We've got the game that's not exactly bad, but also isn't the game I want to be playing right now. If there was ever a game in this trilogy overly prone to being fucked up, it's Year of the Dragon, and there is a simple reason for that. This game has so many different control schemes throughout. From the various playable characters to the abundance of vehicle missions, there is a lot of room for error. Sunny Villa is actually the level I got to try out at PAX Australia, and at the time, I wasn't too fond on the jumping and gliding. Like I said earlier, it doesn't take long to get used to, so any grievances I had back then are irrelevant at this point. So charging in, it was really cool having already played this. The first thing of note here is holy shit, it takes no time at all to load up areas outside of the main map. That's surprising to me, and it's one of the things that really puts me off this game, that these side events don't take place within the main stage, like in Spyro 2. But this instant switching almost remedies that in a way, or at the very least, it helps to keep the pace going, so off to a good start. A lot of the side challenges in this game, much like 2, have also been made a lot easier. More slowing down from what I can tell to give us more reaction time, but also speeding things up. Supercharges in 3 act like they do in 1, getting faster and faster the longer you're supercharging. But the original Spyro 3 had you at a constant speed. That's why it always takes myself a few laps to catch these egg thieves in Icy Peak. But look at them here! Within seconds, I'm actually overtaking them, and you can see from looking at this gameplay, I was not ready for that. Speed, speed, so much speed! It completely breaks this game whenever it's involved. It seems any challenge that might have been considered even remotely challenging has been made a hell of a lot easier. Well, aside from playing as Hunter in Mushroom Speedway. As for all of the other characters, I've got to say, I am really impressed. Like, over the moon impressed. Sheila has probably had the most redesign out of all the characters here. She's got hair now and has a Bush Ranger shirt. Nice touches. But as for Control, wow, it's great. Sheila was always one of my preferred characters in the original, and while she has been slowed down, it actually gives you more control over her movement. She feels a bit heavier to play as, which is how it should be. She's a big fucking kangaroo after all. They do plod around, and yet, it's all still so bouncy and fun. They've fucking nailed it here. Moving on to Sergeant Bird, he also controls very faithfully. At first, I felt like the camera was a little strange at times, trying to pick items up, but I got used to it very quickly, and his missiles do a much better job at taking people out. Bird's side missions are normally some of my most dreaded, but here, they were completely painless and rather enjoyable. Bentley the Abominable Snow Beast, on the other hand, I've got less to say. They've clearly tried to fix him up with some faster movement and moving the camera over his shoulder to accommodate for his large size, but it's just uncomfortable. In particular, there is a mission where you need to whack some moles without hitting any of the dudes tunneling underground. Having Bentley forced to the right side of the screen completely blocks your peripheral vision, both limiting your depth perception and meaning you get stuck on characters or other objects that you can't see. That being said, however, Bentley rarely shows up anyway, and aside from the camera, it's no worse than the original, given he is much more nimble. Then we get to Agent 9. Seriously, does anybody actually enjoy playing as this guy? I mean, all of these characters are just how I remember them, meaning they're all charming and lovable, while this monkey fuck is over here ruining everything, but above all that, I can't stand his levels. So, why am I left wanting more of them? What is going on here? Praise for Agent 9? How is that even possible? They've done it. They've actually fucking done it. Agent 9 is so much fun in this game. With full camera control to aim, it just totally fixes his levels. I'm stunned by how good this is, and I'm actually disappointed at the lack of Agent 9 in this game now. Even his first-person segments were a lot less painful, again thanks to more fluent, fuller movement. This entire trilogy is as sound as it's ever been. Being from a PAL region and forced to hear the Harbour Speedway music across all of the speedways in this game, actually playing these to their original tracks is also a massive plus from me. Everything here gets a massive plus from me, and I'm supposed to hate this game. How did they do it? I'd normally be ready to tap out after the first world, but I didn't even start to burn out on this until I reached Midnight Mountain. And I'd say that has more to do with blasting through all these Spyro levels in rapid succession than anything I normally dislike about this game. But even feeling burnt out, I still couldn't help myself. Levels that normally drive me insane are not even close to being painful, as a lot of the driving is so much better for me. In some cases like this boat that only appears once, it's still not the best, but it's no worse than it ever was at least. And in the case of something like these submarines or the skateboard, vehicles that appear multiple times across the game, they're great! So many little fixes to all of these that make the overall game that much more enjoyable for me. Now, it can get a little too easy in some areas, either by design compared to the originals, like with the tank in Haunted Tomb, I don't think anybody's gonna have trouble with that anymore, or accidentally with how the supercharge is being used incorrectly here. But at the end of the day, this game for me, finally, sits on par with Ripto's Rage. Spyro Year of the Dragon gets 8 out of 10. I honestly never thought it'd be possible for me to enjoy playing this game as much as I did here. But much like the other two games, there are issues. There always will be. During my run of Spyro 3, I'd occasionally run into gems that refused to be picked up or maybe spawned underneath the map. But it was such a rare sight, nothing close to the likes of Enter the Dragonfly, and while I know others have had much more substantial issues with the Reignited trilogy as a whole, I personally experienced no other major glitches or problems. And for anything I wasn't that big on, not once took away from the enjoyment factor. This is now such a well-rounded, solid, evenly balanced trilogy of games that I'm not shy to say, this is the definitive way to experience them. The Spyro Reignited trilogy gets 8 out of 10. This here is a top-level remake I'm so glad to have enjoyed. But it's honestly a bittersweet experience for me. You see, there's always been this split with the fan base. Do you prefer Crash or Spyro? And for me, that was always Crash. So while I am somewhat disappointed by Activision and Vicarious Vision's ignorance with some of the decisions made with the Insane Trilogy, I'm glad that so much was clearly learned by Toys for Bob with Reignited. This is a game all involved should be really proud of, as I think it sets the bar for all future remakes of this fashion. I'm honestly not even that big on these things, as I'd prefer new memories to old ones, but this leaves me wanting more. I can't wait until the Skylanders Reimburse Trilogy. But until then, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share. I'm Square Eye Jack, and I hope you have a great fucking day. Thanks for watching.